Pick me up there, guy. Why are you upside down? All right. Well, this is just crazy. Let's see. Let's set it like this. And then we'll do this. So we are learning a little bit more every day about live streaming and all these other things. There we go. It's not going to quite do it, is it? I cannot understand. All right. We've done this once before this morning already, and we'll get there, guys. There we go. Yeah, I wanted to kind of get the sunrise back there. All right, but when I sit it down there, oh, there. Hey, look at that. There's still not much sunrise, but there we go. Okay, good enough. It's a terrible way to start out a sunrise service monologue, I understand, but we've had some difficulty with our capture card on the computer, and so until we can get that worked out, we're having to do it by phone. And so here we are. This is titled Unexpectedly Called, and it's a first-person narrative based on Simon of Cyrene. The taste of bitter herbs was still in my mouth, a lingering reminder of God's redeeming power. I had scraped and saved for years to raise the fare from Simon from Cyrene to Jerusalem. Passover in Jerusalem was the dream of every devout Jew, even so-called Hellenistic Jews such as me. As if it were my fault that I was part of those scattered throughout the civilized world by long-dead conquerors. We were still Jews. We still told the stories of our faith. We still followed Torah. That was why last night had been an unforgettable experience of sensory storytelling. The smells and tastes of the feast coupled with the sights and sounds of retelling the story of how God delivered us out of the hand of Egypt. You could almost feel the destroyer moving among the Egyptians, breaking the will of Pharaoh with the loss of Egypt's firstborn. Singing the songs of deliverance made me feel strong again, prodding on my dreams of Messiah, wooing my heart to hope. God has broken the bitterness of captivity before. Surely he can do it again. It was a rooster's crow that woke me that morning. Something in that call sent a chill through me and left my heart disturbed. Maybe I would go to temple and pray this morning. I was staying with my father's family on the north side of Jerusalem. That was where my family celebrated the Passover whenever they gathered in Jerusalem. I had been here once before, shortly before coming of age. My dad and I had made the journey. He had talked excitedly about one day when I would make the journey with my sons. I wish he had lived to see this day. Alexander and Rufus eagerly asking the questions. Why is this night different from every other night? Why does the ceremony mean so much to you? They were sons to be proud of, diligent in remembering the stories of our people and in studying Torah. After such a night, I decided to let them sleep. Why trouble their hearts with something I couldn't even name. The rooster's call still echoed in my head. I climbed out of bed and faced the temple, uttering the morning prayer. I give thanks to you, living and everlasting King, for you have returned my soul to me with compassion. Great is your faithfulness. Then I washed my hands, thanking God for showing us the way of sanctification, his commandments and the waters of cleansing. I would fast this day because my unsettled heart. So I rubbed a little oil on my face to liven my appearance. The boys still slept, but my cousin was up preparing the meal for the morning. So I told her where I was heading, so that the boys wouldn't worry. The sun was peeking over the Mount of Olives as I headed toward Jerusalem. Soon the third wall would be in sight. The Passover was a glorious and dangerous time in Jerusalem. God's people from around the world came to celebrate his victory over Pharaoh. Their memory burned like an ember of glory, just waiting for the winds of change to whip it back into flame. The trouble was there was always plenty of men trying to blow on the ember for their own glory, to stir up the people to insurrection. Just this past week, a Nazarene rabbi had ridden into Jerusalem on a donkey, inciting the crowd to hail him as the Messiah. I think he made a mistake, though. I think he misunderstood the prophet Zechariah. Kings only ride donkeys in times of peace, and the only peace we know today is the Roman peace brought by the edge of the sword and maintained with whips and nails. I imagined he'd end up like all the others, dead, forgotten, or both. It was because of men like Jesus and other insurrectionists that the Roman governor came to Jerusalem during the Passover to keep a close eye on the proceedings. As I neared the second wall, I could hear that Jerusalem was alive with people. There was some great hubbub coming from the direction of the temple, perhaps something the governor had been keeping an eye on. Not that any Jew would have minded if these insurrectionists ever succeeded, particularly during this time of year. Thoughts of the promised Messiah ran high during the Passover, even more so in recent history. It was like there was something in the air that every true believer could taste, could smell, could feel. This latest Passover felt real, like we were going somewhere, like Moses was here again, ready to lead us out of bondage. With the fantasies of deliverance dancing in my head, I walked through the gate of the city. The streets were eerily empty, but the city was not quiet. I could hear shouts of anger and cries of despair, each commingling into waves of audible dread. Strangely drawn, I moved toward the commotion, snatches of crowd noise drifting through the air. Crucify him! Miserable thieves using the Passover like a fold to gather the flock for shearing. Some say he's Elijah. But would God let a prophet suffer this way? Like a gathering flood, a great crowd shot out from between the buildings ahead of me, shouting and cursing, kicking at something that scuttled in the middle of the mob. The crowd parted to open the way for whatever they kicked, and to my horror, it was a man. Naked, he stumbled under the weight of a heavy wooden beam. Crucifixion, I thought. I wonder who Pilate released. Quickly, I moved aside as the crowd overtook me. As the man passed, I could see the anguish and terror in his eyes. I could smell the fear on him. The first wave of bodies passed, followed closely by a second. The second wave moved more warily than the first, and with good reason. The man in the middle bore a crossbeam like the first, but he was angry. He gathered his strength and hurtled at the crowd, trying to crash into them with the beam. His arms and legs and thighs all oozed with blood where the lash of the guard had flayed the skin. I could hear him muttering curses against the crowd, against Caesar, and against the God he did not fear. But soon this knot of bodies passed also. The third wave was the greatest of all and the loudest. At first, I could not see who the crowd abused, who they cursed and spat upon. Then, as if Moses himself had parted the waters, the crowd rolled away, revealing the man within, if man you could call him. He was a shambling mass of bleeding flesh, and he stumbled beneath the weight of the beam. His hair clung to his forehead, damp with blood that oozed from underneath the crown of thorns. His face bulged with purple welts. The skin on his shoulders and back hung in tatters, exposing the sinews beneath. Each step left a bloody footprint, surrounded by a galaxy of crimson stars that fell from 1,000 wounds. Horrified, I watched as each trembling step brought him near. I was petrified, too appalled to move. Who's that? I asked to the air before me. Jesus, if you're a prophet, tell us who hit you. Where are your miracles now, Nazarene? The Nazarene rabbi? That Jesus? Numb and slack-jawed, I watched as the crowd pressed around me like a river flows around a rock. My eyes riveted to the bloodied form of the Nazarene. I wanted to flee, to fly away, to be anywhere but where I could see, could smell the battered form of Jesus. But it was like my feet had set down roots. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. My own breathing became ragged as if failing, like the strength of the flayed man before me. Even as he became visibly weaker, my own breath seemed to fade. Suddenly I was aware of someone shouting at me, his face so close to mine. His spittle dampened my nose. In the name of Caesar, Lord and Emperor, you are commanded to assist that poor wretch. Carry his cross. He'll die in the streets otherwise. What, me? No, wait, that would mean defilement. I couldn't bring my boys to temple. I've come all... Save your sob story for the governor. If you have a dispute, see him. For now, get to it or I'll make your flesh look like his. He punctuated his threat by loosing the whip at its length, sprawling in menacing curls around his feet. Fear and rage crowded in my throat, rage struggling to scream against fear's blanket of silence. In the end, fear won out, and I walked slowly toward the Nazarene. At first, I tried to find an angle that would allow me to carry the cross without defiling myself with his blood, but it was useless. There was so much blood. It was everywhere. Revulsion twisted inside me. Finally, I bent low enough to get under both man and beam, wrapping my arms around him. He moaned in pain at my touch, but his breathing seemed to improve as I took the weight of the beam on my shoulders. Together we stumbled back out the gate that I had entered not long before, following the echoes that surrounded the first two condemned men. We spoke not a word to each other. What do you say to a man whose life has become a gruesome mess? To a man on his way to be crucified? Defiled and feeling abandoned, I began mouthing the words of a psalm. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from the words of my groaning? Soon both our breathing became ragged under the exertion of climbing. We were nearing Golgotha, the place of the skull. Like a horse sensing the end of the journey and the hay and water that awaits, I sped up as the crest drew near. I was going to break and run as soon as this burden was dropped from my shoulders, but my legs buckled as we came to the appointed place, bringing the beam down on the back of my neck and head, driving my face into the rocky soil. For a moment, all was darkness. I could neither see nor move, but lay panting, fearing a lash with each breath. I could feel the warm flow of blood trickling down my nose. I could taste it in my mouth. Then I heard a mocking voice. Wine, my lord? The myrrh drink used to deaden pain and prolong the suffering of the crucified. My heart froze when Jesus croaked, No. Then the hammer began to fall, and Jesus' cries of pain joined those of the other men around, the other men being crucified. Rough hands lifted my head and squeezed the myrrh drink into my mouth. I gulped and gagged with the vile stuff burning down my throat. My vision began to clear. My strength returned. When I heard the earth-shaking thump of the cross coming to rest on the ground, my head snapped up to see Jesus crucified. I was transfixed by the vision. The vision of him nailed and bleeding on the cross. How long I knelt at the foot of the cross, I cannot say. I only know that as I knelt there, I came to realize that I was wrong about Jesus. He wasn't an insurrectionist. An insurrectionist prays for God to destroy his enemies, not to forgive them. He uttered no curse, though many came forward to curse him. He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Christ. Come on, Jesus, save yourself and us. He refused anything that would reduce his suffering. He even stopped to comfort some women who were wailing for him. How could someone in his condition even be aware of another's pain? No, there was more to this Jesus than I first believed. As I stumbled down the hill, I heard him cry out the very prayer I had uttered earlier. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why indeed? I wondered. Later, as I washed his blood from my skin, I decided that after the Sabbath I would search out his disciples and learn more of this rabbi from Nazareth. I lay abed the day after the Sabbath, the stiffness of being called unexpectedly to bear the cross of Jesus, playing along every muscle in my body. I was finding it hard to rise, so I lay there for a moment, gathering my strength. I was beginning to drift off into another dream when the patter of feet on the steps startled me. Rufus and Alexander burst into the room, excitement written all over their faces. Father, Alexander called breathless, our cousin was in the market this morning, and you'll never guess what she heard. Jesus, the one you helped, his grave is empty. They say he's alive again. Daddy? Rufus asked wide-eyed. What does it mean? I sat for a moment, my head bowed. I offered the morning prayer, giving God thanks for returning my soul and the soul of Jesus of Nazareth. I wasn't sure what it all meant, not yet, but I knew one thing with a certainty I couldn't explain. Jesus was alive again, and that meant hope for us all. May you have a blessed Easter. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed.